Victoria, isn't it ironic? Israel gave up Gaza, and you look, fast forward to see how they built the tunnels underground. They really set up a government and an infrastructure to destroy Israel. I mean, and when you think about the open borders that we have here in the United States, and it seems like there's just no end in sight. Don't you think at some point the Biden administration should wake up and say, no, we need to get our borders under control, because we could have the same chaos right here on American soil, because we know they want the next Gaza to be in a major city like New York or Los Angeles.
Well, as I mentioned several weeks ago when I was on your show, Armstrong, I think the people within the Biden administration are actually waking up to the fact that public opinion is telling them that it is time to secure our border with something like a wall, a physical barrier. You know, now a majority of Democrats, a majority of Republicans always have thought this, but now even a majority of Democrats and a majority of independents see this, and they want the Biden administration to put a stop to it. And I think that pro-security candidates, whether they're going to be in the House, in the Senate, running in the presidential race, I think that bodes well for them, because I think the Biden administration won't be able to convince people that they've changed their tune when they have individuals like Alejandro Mayorkas still in charge of the DHS, where, you know, I believe the number most recently was over 9 million illegal crossings have happened since the start of the Biden administration, and that number is completely unacceptable, and Americans of all political stripes are realizing that they don't want this.
Okay, let me come to you, Victoria. What do we know so far about the few decisions and the positions that the new Speaker of the House has taken and the direction Congress is moving now?
Well, I think as we were talking about in the earlier segment, we want bills that are not omnibus bills. We want bills that are more for transparency with the American people, and this issue of funding potential assistance to Israel is one of them. And I think that that is a demand that the conservatives, you know, some might say they're problematic, but they were the ones that ousted former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. And I think that that is a promise that these individuals are going to try and hold the new Speaker Johnson to. And he seems to be kind of following the line that they've laid out for him, unlike what Kevin McCarthy did, because you know, if we go back to it, right, Kevin McCarthy did not have a very easy path to the speakership initially. And so the fact that we had quite a robust fight in Congress over the past few weeks, I think is a representative of the fact that the people that first instilled their trust in McCarthy were disappointed, and they wanted to make sure that they had somebody that was going to not disappoint them again. And I think so far he is serving that. We also know that, you know, he is a family man, he is a Christian, he is a conservative, and, you know, there's some hit pieces already about him, about the fact that he hasn't become personally wealthy from the time that he spent in Washington, and the mainstream media is spinning this as a negative, but I think that this makes him so much more relatable to the American people, and that if he, because, you know, I think a lot of the times when we elect representatives, when we first elect them, they are representative of the people, but then when they come to Washington, they lose that initial connection. And, you know, at least to me, it seems that Mike Johnson is very much in tune with what is going on, both in his own district and with people across the country, because he's living through it just like they are.
You know, Victoria, how do conservatives value and interpret the concept of war in today's geopolitical scenario, and how do you respond to some of the concerns that Robert has? And I raise it in this context because, you know what, I don't care what your politics may be, I don't think nobody wants war. Well, I know I don't. As much as I love Israel, and listen, I love Israel, okay, but not to the point where I want there to be war. I don't think nobody wants that.
I totally agree with you, Armstrong. I don't think anybody does want war because it is expensive. You know, even on the left, we've seen folks saying, oh, you know, Janet Yellen says that we can afford a war on two fronts. Why don't we just get rid of all the student loans, right? So that's kind of a perspective that we're seeing from the left. From the right, I think that we are very frustrated with politicians that will just keep and you know, not really practice that soft diplomacy and want to kind of jump to the final step, which is actually kind of a boots on the ground invasion. I don't think anybody is necessarily talking about it in this scenario, but we were already assisting Israel through our military might. Now, folks are kind of asking, what is the difference between Ukraine and Israel? Why should we spend in Israel and not Ukraine? The issue is that, with Israel, we have long-standing diplomatic processes where actually dollars that we spend in Israel actually come back to U.S. companies. So that is kind of the difference, because Ukraine is newer. These relationships are non-existent, and if they do exist, they're kind of in their infancies. Versus with Israel, we have a long-standing kind of partnership in that regard. But the other thing that we do look at is that Israel, at least from the latest things that I've seen, they still want to handle this on their own. And I think many people in the U.S., no matter their political stripes, do want to see Israel handle this conflict on their own, and they don't want to see the U.S. any more involved. Now, I definitely would say that I myself land more in that camp. However, I do think that it is frustrating that we still have, last number I saw was at least 10 Americans being held hostage by Hamas. I think that there are ways that we can do that, through clandestine operations to go out and get these people out. But I do think that that necessarily does not mean a full-scale war, especially, again, if these operations, we only find out about them after they happen, because this is what we're seeing with some other European nations. I believe it was Italy. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was saying that she wants to get Italians out, and we haven't really seen President Biden take a stance that is that strong as we're seeing from other people that have people held in custody by Hamas.
Well, I think he said